You can add all the body cam footage, visual effects, and prestige performances that you want. I know a screenlife movie when I see one. Hi everybody, Anthony here from Awesome Anthony Productions, and today I'm going to give you my review of Mercy. Now on to the review. Directed by Timur Bekmambetov. Yes, that director, the same guy that brought us my worst movie of 2025, War of the Worlds. Mercy stars Chris Pratt as Chris Raven, an LAPD detective that, following the death of his partner, helped pioneer a revolutionary AI-based court system. And when I say revolutionary, I mean horrifying. With this system, once someone is arrested for a capital crime, they are given exactly 90 minutes to prove their innocence to an AI judge before being immediately executed. No jury. No appeals, just AI and a ticking clock. But wouldn't you know it, Chris wakes up strapped in that chair himself, accused of murdering his wife Nicole, played by Annabelle Wallis. Now facing interrogation from AI Judge Maddox, played by Rebecca Ferguson, Chris has just an hour and a half to prove his innocence, find the real killer, and escape execution. Okay, let's get the small amount of praise out of the way before I start laying into this damn thing. To start, this is actually a pretty cool concept. Timely as ever, the idea of defending yourself to an AI judge is genuinely terrifying, and the added wrinkle of having access to every smart device, surveillance camera, body cam, phone, and social media account to build your defenses, on paper, cool as hell. And honestly, that concept is almost entirely carried by Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson's performances. Even when the movie is at its most trite, silly, and painfully obvious, they still do their best to anchor it and make it something watchable. Pratt in particular gives a surprisingly compelling performance, at least in the beginning. He starts off pretty disoriented and emotionally raw because of the death of his wife, and he handles the anger, confusion, guilt, and desperation of being trapped in the system pretty well. There are even a few moments in that first act that actually land emotionally, especially during his conversations with his on-screen daughter Britt, played by Kylie Rogers. Those scenes almost trick you into thinking that this movie's going to go a lot deeper than it actually does. And Rebecca Ferguson is very solid here. She's already one of my favorite actresses, but she plays Judge Maddox as a cold, emotionless AI that actually starts showing hints of understanding and empathy. Her back and forth with Chris Pratt is easily the best part of the movie, and when the film slows down enough to just let them talk, it almost works. Almost, because that's where the praise ends and the evidence gathering begins. And once that starts, you quickly realize that this movie has already shown its hand. We then spend nearly the entire runtime watching Chris Pratt call people, bark orders, argue with an AI, and stare at screens over and over and over again. He's doing his best, but it becomes very repetitive, strangely dull, and pretty laughable at points, especially when the script forces him to say some pretty awful dialogue. And just like Ice Cube in Bekmambetov last movie, Chris Raven is not a likable character. Like, at all. He's an abusive alcoholic whose wife and daughter are constantly afraid of him, and the movie somehow expects you to root for this guy escaping his execution without ever really earning that sympathy. You just have to stretch your suspension of disbelief so hard to care whether or not he gets out of that chair. What makes it even more frustrating is that there is so much action, investigation, and interrogation happening outside of this courtroom that Chris could have been involved in, but instead he's stuck in that damn chair while having everybody else do the work for him, especially his on-screen partner Jack, played by Kylie Reyes. And look, I'm torn here with that. On the one hand, if this had been shot like a traditional crime thriller but still with the same cliched crap and bland dialogue, I still wouldn't have liked it. But locking Chris Pratt in a chair for 90 minutes, even with all the phone screens, CCTV footage, and body cam clips thrown in, it still is just boring. Which sucks because Pratt and Ferguson are really good here. They're just completely handcuffed to this screenlife format and mediocre script that doesn't do them any favors. And speaking of the script, putting aside the fact that this movie feels like it's actually advocating for AI in the justice system, which is dumb at best and genuinely concerning at worst, it takes the easiest, laziest, most predictable narrative turns at every step. It's actually incredibly predictable. I figured out who the killer was within the first 20 minutes, and I even guessed the little twist that they threw in at the end long before it happened. Every red herring they throw at you felt exactly like that, a red herring, to the point where I kept thinking, well, clearly this person isn't the killer, it's way too early in the movie. There's also no real depth to any idea that the script introduces here. It flirts with ideas about AI due process, surveillance, and Minority Report style justice, but the moment those ideas show up in the script, they are dropped and never meaningfully explored again. And that dialogue, yikes. When the movie isn't turning Pratt and Ferguson into walking, talking exposition machines, it relies on the most melodramatic, overwritten, and painfully familiar lines you've heard 1,000 times before, and almost always delivered better elsewhere. By the time we reach the climax, this movie completely flies off the rails into full-on silliness, complete with villain monologues, absurd choices, and an ending that somehow manages to be both over the top and anticlimactic, fading to black after the most generic resolution possible. This movie just doesn't have it. The concept is interesting, interesting, and Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson are genuinely good in their roles, but they are trapped in another low-effort, cliche-ridden, melodramatic screen life movie that never earns its runtime or does anything meaningful with its ideas. If you want to watch this as a higher budget, so bad it's good B-movie when it hits streaming in a few weeks, you and your friends might squeeze some enjoyment out of it. But for me, it just kind of felt like I wasted 90 minutes of my time. And that's my review of Mercy. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment if you saw this movie, and I will see you next time for my review of Return to Silent Hill.